plus years ago, and it hadn't really changed that much. So for me, when I was going to school to get my degree in EE, electrical engineering, it was just me in the classroom full of men for like most of my 4 years of college, and almost no students of color, for those whole 4 years. And her classroom in the summer camp back in 2011 looked exactly the same. And it was mind-boggling to me that it had not changed that much in 25 plus years. And I also saw that it impacted her, and that, she noticed that she felt isolated. She felt that she didn't get, she wasn't heard in the classroom full of boys. And so I was really, really concerned, I guess is the best word to say from a mother's standpoint, that I would not be able to kind of feed this passion that she had, this natural passion that she had, and that she would just stop doing this because she didn't want to feel isolated. And that's really why Black Girls Code, came into being, is because I wanted to create an opportunity, a safe environment for my daughter to find other girls, that were like her, that were interested in the same thing, and be able to create a space where she could learn and feel supported along her journey. And it didn't exist at the time. And so Black Girls Code was created for that reason.
So how long did it take from that moment of epiphany with seeing your daughter in that environment to creating Black Girls Code? I mean, was it something where you dropped everything, dropped your career, and...
Oh, no, not at all. So it's still, okay, I think I would say that and I say this sometimes, that I was a reluctant social entrepreneur. Because I had no interest in starting a nonprofit. I wanted no parts of that. Because I had been a volunteer at work for many, many years, and this different philanthropic things that we were doing in our corporations. And I had volunteered for a nonprofit, and I just was like, no. That is hard work, and it is hard work, and I don't want to do that. But as I kind of really talked to a lot of people in the space, I also saw this issue of the lack of diversity and inclusion popping up in other places. So along the same time, I was looking to come out of corporate America and really go into the startup industry, and I saw that the maturity of the field looked just like my daughter's classroom. It wasn't diverse. There weren't very many women in the room, not very many women at the conferences that I was attending. And there was this big elephant in the room that no one was talking about, and that was the lack of diversity. And so I was seeing it both in my professional life as well as in what I was seeing with my daughter. And it probably took about 6 months for me to decide, okay, enough is enough. I need to do something about this. But I still kept my day job at the time for about a year and a half after I started Black Girls Code, and until the business or the organization just grew so much that I just took a leap of faith and quit and started to do this full time.
I'm going to definitely want to follow up with some questions later about how Black Girls Code really took off and beyond the Bay Area. But first, Eric Weaver, I want to ask you about how you got involved with Opportunity Fund. As I understand it, you studied something called liberation theology at Harvard and were a self-described progressive activist back in the 1980s. Now, how in the heck did you go from being a radical to being an executive in the button-down world of finance?
It was a surprise to everyone. If you knew me in college, I would have been voted least likely to go to business school. I had a band and long hair and the whole thing. But left college, went to El Salvador, did sort of relief work. I was always very motivated to do something about economic and social justice, but I didn't think business was the ticket. Went to El Salvador, worked with refugees there, came back to D.C. where I grew up and did community organizing. But it was actually I was doing affordable housing development work first as an organizer and then as kind of a number cruncher developer, and that kind of turned me on to like business. I was like, business is actually fun, and you can like get stuff done and make things happen. So that led me to business school. Loved business school, but did not want to go to work for a corporation, and was graduated without a job, was sort of desperate to find a job, and learned about this law called the Community Reinvestment Act, which requires banks to invest in low-income communities along with wealthy communities, that was just beginning to be enforced when Clinton came into office way back when. And I saw an opportunity, like banks actually have this need to put money into the communities that I care about, and they don't know how to do it. And so I'm going to create a organization that will do that. And I used my community organizing skills and got 15 banks to pool money together and start making microloans to small businesses. And that was kind of the genesis back in the early 90s.
See, in just these two introductory remarks, we have debunked the notion that that idealism and social good are not compatible with either technology or finance. So thank you for that, and thank you for your choices. Kimberly, I want to ask you, obviously, as you noted, when you first got in, there was a tremendous lack of, and there still is a lack of diversity in the tech world as an electrical engineer. What inspired you? Did you have a mentor or somebody who was a role model that got you into it?
Sure. So for me, it's interesting. When I went to college in 1985, and if you look at some of the curves, the data that shows like women's progression in the arts and sciences, and specifically in engineering, you'll see a peak right around that time. Right around 85, that's when there's a peak. But that was a time when there's really a big push to recruit more women into the field of engineering. You want more women and want more students of color. So my goal was never to go in engineering. I always thought I would be a lawyer because, you know, I'm like Eric, I've been radical for a very long time, since like I was a baby. But I just wanted to go to law school. I wanted to fight for rights, for justice for folks, and that's what I always thought I would do until I got to high school, and my guidance counselors were like, well, you know, since you're in these advanced accelerated classes and you're focused on math and science, you really should apply to go to engineering school. And I was like, okay. You know, I didn't know anything about the field. It wasn't really an interest growing up, but it was an opportunity that was presented by my guidance counselors because of my focus in math and science, and that's kind of how I ended up. That's why I ended up there. And even going through college, I always thought that I would graduate and then go to law school and still go back and be an attorney. But I just didn't find my way back to doing that. You know, the work really took me to all these different avenues and there's opportunities to really use my creative skills in a way that I didn't really think of engineering in the first place. So, but I didn't really have anyone coming up or growing up that was an engineer. It was not something that I knew as a career path. So that's one of the reasons within Black Girls Code we're really heavily focused on mentorship and really showing the girls that there are other engineers like in the field that look like them, that have similar backgrounds, because that's something that's very important in terms of creating this self-confidence for them to be able to stick with the field.
Did it make it difficult when you got in the field to stay in the field? Did you feel a little bit alienated?
Without a doubt. I talk a lot about, you know, in my freshman year going into these big open classrooms with, you know, 100 students in it and being the only student of color, being the only woman, and this very deep feeling of isolation. And that persisted through my college career because I just didn't know. Like, I came from Memphis, inner city Memphis, you know, one of the kids that were kind of plucked out of the neighborhood and put on this accelerated path and tracked all the way from K through 12. And so I did not have some of the resources that my fellow students had. So I didn't even know that there was such thing as a test file until probably like junior year. I didn't know what that was. I just knew people were making better grades on the test than I was. And I was like, oh, they're smart. And maybe I'm not, even though I was at the top of my class in high school. And so it took me a while to figure out that there was a game being played, but I just didn't know how to play the game. And that was an unfortunate piece of being in this isolated environment where there weren't people. I never had a black African-American professor in 4 years of going to Vanderbilt. I never had one, never saw one. Not in the School of Engineering. Now, I could go into the Arts and Science School and take a class there, but in the School of Engineering that never existed for me. So it was very difficult to kind of find those pockets of support that would be able to give me, both the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, the keys to success in order for me able to make it out of there. Yeah.
Now, for those of you who did not have a chance to read the profiles of our visionary finalists in the Chronicle, for those of you who are students, we'll just add that to your assignment for reading assignment for the week. Eric specializes in giving microloans to really small businesses who otherwise might not qualify for a conventional loan. So, Eric, in reading the profile in the Chronicle, I saw that your first loan was for $17,000 for an aquarium store, and that the fish became collateral.
Oh.
Now, how does that work?
That's kind of a joke. Obviously, the fish would not really be collateral. The point was there was no collateral.
Okay, so you were not going to repossess
We were not
the
going to
fish.
repossess the fish.
Okay, just to
yeah.
be clear. Our reporter didn't clarify that in the story.
Yeah. No, that was our very first loan when we got started. It was two brothers. They had started selling fish at the flea market in San Jose and had just moved into a retail location and needed money to sort of fit the place out. And we took a flyer on them, $17,000. They paid us back. We lent them another $50,000 a while later, and they're still in business. And there are lots of people that have good, functioning businesses that if you can take the time to get to know them, you can get very comfortable lending them money, but they don't fit into the conventional box. They don't have, a sterling credit score. They don't own a home, but the economy runs on. These kind of businesses are creating most of the new jobs in our economy, and putting money into these kind of enterprises is just hugely beneficial to all the people that we care about making a better life for. So,
Of course, a lot of the reasons that if they go into Wells Fargo or Citibank or Chase or Schwab, that they're not going to give them a loan as they're considered too high risk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where do you draw the confidence that these small businesses actually are going to pay you back? And I know you're nonprofit, but you at least want to come out.
yeah, it's
Even.
part of it is risk, but part of it is also just loan size. If you borrow $5,000, or you want to borrow $5,000, the lender's like, well, best case, I'm going to earn a couple $100 off you if you pay it back, and I have to go to all this trouble to underwrite it and figure you out, and it's just not profitable. So part of it's just size, that if people want small amounts of money, the mainstream economy is not going to lend to them because they can't make money. The only way you can make money lending to people like that is to offer very high-priced, sort of predatory products, and that's out there. And then as far as the risk goes, it's a question of looking beyond sort of stereotypes and conventional data and just getting to know somebody. We have a 98% repayment rate over years and years and years of doing this. People will pay you back, and they pay us back, I think, because we believe in them. Like, we're not a faceless corporation. We're a nonprofit that they get to know. We take the time to get to know them. We care about them, and they want to pay us back. So the risk can be mitigated. It is hard to make money with very small loans, and we do fundraise to cover some of those costs. But as we grow, we've grown to be a pretty large institution, and the more we grow, the more scale we get, the less we need to fundraise, the more we can get close to being self-sufficient.
Now, I will spare you from being buttonholed by a bunch of students on your way out, and I'll just go ahead and ask the question for them. You give student loans?
We have not gotten into the student loan business. We do have a savings program for community college and four-year college students who are low income, and we basically teach them. We do some financial literacy education, and then They enroll in a savings program. We help them open a savings account, and we match their savings 2-to-1 with money we raise from donors as a way for them to graduate faster with less debt. But we haven't gotten to the student loan business yet. It could happen.
Just had to ask.
Yeah.
I'm on your side here.
It's needed. I mean, there's
Oh, yeah.
it's needed.
It's a huge problem. Kimberly, one of the things when you talk to Silicon Valley executives, as we often do, and ask about the lack of diversity in the field, the thing they'll always say is, well, the problem is the pipeline. There aren't enough students of color coming through the pipeline that we can graduate, that we can hire. Interesting anecdote that you had about what you found out about the pipeline, particularly if you could talk about when you went to Atlanta and found out that there's a great deal of interest among young African American women in going into tech fields.
Well, I think when you look at the numbers, I always go back to, like, what do the numbers say? So I think when we, look at the number that everyone talks about in terms of the field of innovation in STEM and jobs, there's this 1.4 million estimated STEM-related jobs in the next 10 years from now. So that's what they're trying to fill as an industry. So we're only filling about maybe a third of that now with the current graduates of any ethnicity that are coming out of school. So there's a gap in general from a pipeline standpoint. But when you look at the number of African American engineers, the graduating about 8% African Americans. So only about 3% of them are women, but they're graduating about 8% overall. And when you look at the industry overall, when the diversity numbers start to trickle out, you're seeing, maybe 2% African American representation in the field. So there's a disconnect there in terms of what these corporations are saying and from a pipeline standpoint, because their current representation in the industry is not equal to what the current graduate status is for African American students. So that tells me that there's something else going on. They're either not attracting them as they come out of school. There's something wrong in the interviewing process that is weeding people out. People are leaving the industry in droves. The attrition rate is very high. Or, they're just not really interested in filling them with these candidates that are available. And I think it's a little bit of all of that that's at play now. So we're working at the front end of the funnel, like getting more girls to go to college and major in computer science. But what happens 4 years later? That's the question. So we can fill the pipeline on the front end, but is the industry going to shift to be able to open their doors and welcome this talent when they're ready 4 years down the line? And that's what's still a question that hasn't really been answered.
What do you think is the biggest barrier with the young women who go into your program? Is it they're feeling that, I'm going to feel too isolated there? We talk about the barriers that the industry puts up. What about within the
Well, I think one of the things that we found is that there's an overwhelming demand and interest in terms of girls of color in technology. So that was one of the things that was an untruth that was told when we first started Black Girls Code. Like, girls are not interested in gaming, but we knew every day that we came into the workshops on a Saturday, we had to pry the girls away from the computers because they were gaming. So we're like, really? Like, my daughter's a gamer. That's all she does. And these girls, they play these games. They are interested in gaming. So that's not true. So what we really found is that it's an exposure issue. So because they don't see representation of women in the field, most of the girls are just learning about the creative part of this tool of technology for the first time when they come into our programs. And there's absolutely no lack of interest. So most of our classes have 100 girls in them at a time and one Saturday. We have requests from all over the country to bring a chapter to multiple cities. We're in 13, but we probably have a list twice as large for people wanting us to start chapters in their city. So there's not a lack of interest. It's more of a lack of exposure and opportunity. And we're trying to fill that opportunity gap as fast as we can to really get the classes to the places where they're needed.
How much infrastructure do you need in a chapter? Do you actually set up an office and have staff in each of those cities?
We don't. We call ourselves the Girl Scouts of technology, and we say that for a reason because we're very much like the Girl Scouts in the sense that we have troops or chapters in various cities, and they're all volunteer run and operated. So we have an office in Oakland, we have an office in New York, but in every other city, even in Johannesburg, South Africa, our volunteers are running these programs. So when we go into a city, we have already created the curriculum, we have already created the program structure. Hopefully, we have a sponsor for that city, and then all we need really is the technical volunteers to help run the programs.
Eric, I'm interested of all the loans that you've given out, is there one that stands out that particularly touched you?
Yeah, there's one that that I always talk about, which is a woman named Rosa Funes, who came to us early. This was back when we were just getting started. Now we're a 100-person organization. We're making 2,200 loans a year, $60 million. But this was way back when we were making 30, 40 loans a year. And we had a loan officer, the first person I hired, like it wasn't me, but who did not speak Spanish. So I was still doing the Spanish-speaking clients when they came along. And Rosa asked us, I don't know how she even found us, but she asked us for $500 because she was making what are called recuerdos, just little, favors for baptisms and quinceañeras, and someone told her that we would lend her a little bit of money. So, and my loan committee was like, we don't even make loans. I mean, we're small, but we don't make them that small. But I said, come on, let's do this, make her loan. So we lent her $500. She paid it back right on time. And I didn't hear from her for many years. And then we get an inquiry from somebody who wanted a loan, and they said that he'd been referred by Rosa Funes, and I remembered this name. And I said, wow, what's Rosa up to? It's like, oh, she's got a flower shop in Menlo Park. She's doing great. So I go and visit her. She's got this flower shop right off of Marsh Road in Menlo Park, very successful, put 3 kids through college. As soon as I walked in the door, she remembered me. I remembered her. She had sort of parlayed this little, business into an actual shop, and and like we now have her do the flowers for all of our events, and we've got her doing flowers for, all of our investors' events, and then she's sort of the rock star of our world. And I have a lot of stories like that. I mean, there's a lot of people who have turned a little bit of money into a way to support a family.
And that's got to be gratifying, because if you hesitated at a $500 loan, I don't imagine Citibank would.
No, she wasn't going to get that anywhere else. Yeah, I mean that one's kind of extreme. Yes, very special.
That's great. Kimberly, I'm interested in how Silicon Valley and other tech firms are responding to Black Girls Code. Are they helping you either financially, helping support this worthy endeavor, or in other ways, encouraging? What kind of response are you getting?
Absolutely. So when we started, one of the things that worked to our benefit when we first started Black Girls Code is that I had been sort of like on the networking path and meeting lots of people that were in the tech industry. And the very first organizations that actually came, stepped up to help us were other community organizations. So like Women Who Code, Railsbridge, organizations that were full of like women in technology that were teaching other women. Those were the very first volunteers that we had in our program. And we started in Bayview Hunters Point in San Francisco, and we're lucky enough that a community organization there called 100% College Prep Club gave us their computer lab in the basement of their organization, which had exactly 6 computers, and we were going to have 6 girls, and it worked. So it was the community that really embraced us first. I would say it took Silicon Valley a bit of time to kind of come on board. So in that first year, we started in 2011, 2012, we officially started doing workshops. And the 2 first organizations to kind of step up and help us was, one, Google. They gave us our very first loan and grant. And then the second one was another organization called ThoughtWorks, Inc., who gave us their space and their engineer support for the workshops. And it kind of kept growing from that standpoint, from there. But it wasn't really until I would say 2013 that we kind of really got the doors opened up for us in terms of opportunity. And the turning point in 2013 was it started with Google releasing their diversity numbers. And it started this kind of avalanche of other companies releasing their diversity numbers. And the way that helped Black Girls Code is that, we've been operating for about a year and a half by that time. And we were talking about, this is what we want to do, this program. We want to specifically focus on girls of color. And we got some kickback from that. Like, well, why are you only focusing on girls of color or African-American girls? Shouldn't it be open for everyone? And we don't really understand what you're doing. Some people even asked us to change the name of our organization. But they really didn't see that we were focusing on this community and the why until those diversity numbers hit. And then everybody, the phone started to ring, and we didn't have to knock on so many doors because it was right there in black and white. And for us, it was like, well, yeah, we've been telling you this for the last year and a half, that you have a diversity problem. You specifically have a diversity problem with African Americans and African American women. And so after that, we started to have organizations come to us. We started to get support from all across the valley. Our New York office now is currently in the Google building on a 5-year lease that they've given us for free. So we've seen tremendous support. But it really took those numbers and that kind of that truth-telling, so to speak, for the industry to kind of admit, okay, we have an issue and you're doing something that can help us solve it.
There has been a lot more attention with the numbers, a lot more news coverage. Jesse Jackson has certainly done a lot to call attention to it. So
Absolutely.
I'm sure that helps.
Yeah.
Nothing like data.
Data, that's it.
Eric, it seems like there's a pattern when you have disruptors like yourself come in, that the incumbent industries kind of wait and see. They probably did not see much potential in the folks you're loaning to. And once they do and they see that you're getting a 98% return, and we've seen this in so many sectors, suddenly the big fish come in, not to use the fish metaphor, but they'll come in, they will come in and take over. Have you gotten any inquiries, or do you worry about the idea that suddenly you might be swallowed up, so to speak?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there is a phenomenon that has occurred since the Great Recession that is of great concern. So when the financial crisis hit, banks pulled way back from lending to small businesses, and a whole new breed of lender sort of hit the scene, which we call the alternative small business finance industry. It's kind of partly fintech, but it's partly just old-fashioned boiler room sales brokers. And they have bombarded small businesses with offers of short-term, high-cost credit. There's something called a merchant cash advance that's been just booming in the last 8 years or so, that takes its repayment by taking a percentage of your credit card sales and sort of obfuscates the true cost of the capital and lures a lot of small businesses into very punishing credit. They give you credit like the next day. It's like a payday loan for small business. So that whole thing is going on, and it's of grave concern because small businesses, very small businesses, even though they're probably no more financially sophisticated than the average American household, have no consumer protections whatsoever around business finance. So if you borrow money, if you use a credit card or get an auto loan or a home loan, there are consumer protections in place and disclosures required to sort of make sure that you're not getting screwed. With business lending, even if you're just a dry cleaner, family business, you don't have any CFO, you don't have anybody who's ever been to business school in the business, there are zero disclosures required on how that loan is presented to you. So that's a big battle we're fighting right now. and we're trying to rescue. I mean, we've created something called the Small Business Borrowers Bill of Rights. We're trying to make the case that micro businesses need consumer protections just the way other consumers do. And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry right now, and it's putting a lot of small businesses out of business.
I have to say, Eric and Kimberly, you are absolutely validating our judgment and picking you as finalists for Visionary of the Year. Let's go to some audience questions, if you will. If you want to put your hand up, and we'll get a microphone to you. I will order your professor to give you extra credit if you ask a question.
Hello. I was wondering, what would you say, maybe a question for both of you, the largest challenges that you've faced so far in sort of building what you've created?
I'd say for us, the largest challenge, there are a couple. One is people, talent, recruiting people that can perform at the highest level that aren't, when we're competing with, the fintech industry and with Silicon Valley and everything else, and we've been really good at it, but we like a company like Google or whoever, if they want to launch a new thing, they just hire 150 people and off they go, and we hire people one at a time, and we have to really find those people that really fit our model and believe in it, so that just makes things move more slowly. I'd say the other is just, the amount of just deception and nastiness in the financial services industry that people just expect financial services to be cruddy, and we have to overcome that and get them to trust us, and it's a hard slog.
Really?
I think I would say a bit of the same. So hiring, especially as a startup company, is extremely difficult in finding the folks that have the type of mentality, and I hate to use the term cultural fit because most people down in the tech industry hate that term, but it's real. If used for good, it is real that finding the right folks to kind of help you grow your business, that's been extremely difficult for us as a startup company. And then the other thing I would say is the pressure to scale. As a startup company, I think either for-profit or nonprofit, our funders and supporters, there's a huge pressure to scale and grow. And scale and growth can be good, but it can also be bad, right? Because you have to create scalability in a way that is repeatable and that you maintain integrity as you grow. So we've gone through a couple of years with Black Girls Code where, yes, we have this long list of requests for cities for our chapters, but we're not going to move into all those cities each year. We're going to manage our growth in a way that we can both scale in a way that we maintain integrity, and that when you go to Black Girls Code program in Atlanta, it's the same as New York, it's the same as Oakland, it's the same kind as Joburg. We kind of let them off the hook a little bit there, but it should be the same. It should always be the same quality. And also, I think for us, it's also a manner of making sure that our staff can grow to support the chapters and the growth as we grow, because we don't want to burn ourselves out on a mission. So we want to get to the end of the goal of the mission and not burn ourselves out before we get there. So those are the two biggest challenges that we've had.
More questions coming.
I have a question for Kimberly Bryant. I very much admire what you're doing. I don't know how best to answer this. I don't know if I don't know if I've got it formulated that well yet, but there's a very big need for diversity, and I've been on not-for-profit boards and even a for-profit that I'm involved with, and there's a serious lack of diversity at the board level. So I don't know if you're aware of, or do you address anything at a board level as far as seeking out diversity, and it's a real challenge.
In Black Girls Code, we kind of focus on, so even though we're an organization that kind of drives this whole underlying mission around diversity and inclusion, we also embed that into our work. So we try to hire for diversity. So it's Black Girls Code, but I can't have a team that doesn't have diversity on it. I need that on my team. So when I'm hiring new employees, I'm looking for diverse candidates. And I also look for that as I build my board. One of the things that we see in the nonprofit field is that there are a lot of organizations working with students in the field of technology and STEM, especially in underrepresented communities, but sometimes the staffs and the boards don't represent those communities at all. One of the things that I've been very pleased to be a part of is the San Francisco Foundation has a cohort called Oakland Codes that our organization is a part of, and there are, I think, 6 or 7 other nonprofit organizations that are a part of that cohort. We're all in Oakland. We all have diverse teams. We work with diverse youth, and we also really maintain diversity on our boards. So what I'm hoping is at the end of this, there's a 3-year cohort span that we have with this grant, that we will be able to create a model that can be replicated in other ecosystems. Because I think we really have a key to kind of driving this collective impact model across the organizations as well as in the work that we're doing with students of color.
If I could just ask a quick follow-up, because I know there's a leadership class here from the business school. If each of you could kind of give your tip on what it takes to be a good leader or advice for young people who ultimately aspire to be in a leadership role.
One of the things that I say definitely is the willingness to take risk. I know you guys probably hear that, but it's really true. So when I started Black Girls Code, I had a lot of corporate experience, but I had no nonprofit experience in terms of running a nonprofit. I had to learn that as we go. And one of the quotes I heard today, which I thought was so appropriate, was, sometimes you have to leap and build your wings on the way down. And that's really real. And I think that good leaders are able to take risks, but I always say calculated risk, and learn your way as you build and grow. And I think if you can kind of cultivate that, especially as you're young, especially as you guys are young, you just take as many risks as you can, like right now. We don't have that much to lose. But literally, create this ability to take risk and be willing to learn and be willing to make mistakes and then get back up and keep going. I think that's one of the key elements of really growing as a leader.
Eric, your thoughts?
Be authentic. Be completely ready to admit your mistakes and be vulnerable. If you show the people that you're leading that you're vulnerable and willing to own that, that'll get you huge credibility. Another thing I think is when you're in a leadership position, my philosophy is you want to push everything you can onto other people. You want to do as little as possible that you have to do yourself, but not because you're lazy. But when something hard comes up, you do it. When something's difficult that requires, an uncomfortable situation, you deal with it.
My quick advice, my 2 cents, having been an editor for 30 plus years, is the key to leadership, especially when you're new in a leadership position, is know that you can be comfortable with people around you who are smarter than you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
If they have better ideas than you, guess
Yes.
what? That makes you look good. So
Absolutely.
you don't have to win every argument. In fact,
Absolutely. Yep.
look for those better ideas.
Absolutely.
Just to piggyback on that, I think one of the things for me is that you hear that a lot, but you don't really believe it, right? Especially if you're a leader, you're usually type A a little bit. So, but you have to look for it. So you have to push yourself to look for those folks that are smarter than you. And they don't have to be smarter than you in everything, but find those gaps that you have and find those folks that can fill those gaps better than you can.
Well, the fascinating thing is there's a lot of people who are really, really smart, but they actually don't want to be leaders.
Yeah.
And so you just great.
Absolutely.
Just you do everything, but I'll be the leader. Okay? If you just kind of.
Other other questions?
Hi, this question is for Kimberly. So you talked about mentorship being a really important aspect with the woman, and I'm wondering, so after these girls go through your program, how do you continue to mentor them as they go through college and then start to enter the workforce?
Well, that's one of the things we're trying to figure out. So we don't know exactly yet. So we have this year, and I would say over the next 2 years, the largest, I would say wave of girls that are going to be coming through our program that like started with us in 2012, like my daughter, that are like graduating and they're going off to their next path, to college or whatever, wherever. And so we're now trying to figure out how do we track them, and also how do we make sure that their next path, they're supported along the way. So we're trying to figure out over this year, like, what type of alumni programs can we put in place to kind of support their paths and keep them connected to Black Girls Code. My daughter, who I talk about, is actually graduating this year and taking a gap year. So I've been talking to her about, like, yes, you can come back and work for Black Girls Code and create an alumni program. And this would be a great gap year project for you. But it really is like something that we see a need for, because we are really more concerned now about how do we ensure that the seeds that we have planted with these girls, it continue to flourish and grow. And how can we support that and still do the work that we're doing? So that's one of the goals that we'll be working on this project that's starting this summer.
We'll let that be the last word. I want to thank Eric and Kimberly not only for being here tonight and joining this discussion, which has been terrific, but also for the work that you do. I mean, you are visionaries and you're inspirational, and you're doing important things and really uplifting communities. So please join me in thanking Kimberly and Eric.
Thank you, John, for great moderating. Eric and Kimberly for talking to our students, our alumni, and people in the community. I learned a couple of things. I jotted down some points I learned, so I'm try to share that with you. Not capturing all the richness of their insight. But one thing I learned is that being social entrepreneurship